Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopelak. My guest today is Sally Silverberg. She is an artist who started out with ceramics, and at the top of her success, she changed her medium. So we're going to hear her story today. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
So let's start in the beginning. You went to Alfred University, which is a fabulous school for ceramics.
I did. And at Alfred is the New York State College of Ceramics. And especially back in the 60s, it was the school for ceramics.
Right, and you had some fabulous teachers.
I had fabulous teachers who literally wrote the books, you know.
Right.
And loved ceramics from the moment I got involved in it.
Yeah.
I really I learned to throw very quickly, and I just
When you say throw,
well, throwing at that point in ceramics in the old days, it was basically wheel thrown. We were throwing on potter's wheels. A lot of them were just kick wheels. They're really not even electric wheels. And
you call them kick, the thing like a pedal.
Yeah, the pedal or a treadle. There were treadle wheels. There were kick wheels. There weren't even. In fact, one of my professors invented one of the wheels, the Randall wheel, and
as opposed to like the coil method. In other words, you were really working with the wheel and making.
For the most part, I mean, we were being taught all of the different techniques, but the thrust of the program was training us to be studio potters and to work with this material in a very historic Japanese, almost Japanese way. Yamada came at one point when I was there from Japan to lecture. I mean, it was a fabulous school, and part of it was that there was a graduate school of ceramics, which was at the time the only graduate school of ceramics. And I never did that. I only wound up getting a BFA from Alfred.
But you did go to Turkey.
I actually went to Sweden.
Sweden. Why do I get Turkey?
And my junior year, I got intrigued with the idea of studying somewhere else. Alfred was a very small, very incestuous, very little school, and I thought, and I applied for a program called Scandinavian Seminars and wound up in Stockholm. And
Stockholm.
And I studied there for a full year at a very tiny little folk school. Sweden has a different kind of an education system, where I was basically given the run of the place. The man who was the director, was a lovely man, Fred Forslund, just said, whatever you want to do this year, you can do. So
wonderful.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I basically took over their little ceramic shop, and I spent half my day there, and the other half of the day I spent life drawing. And it was my, I think, my year of independent study taught me how to be an independent artist.
Right, because when you leave school, it's not...
the fallout rate of young artists leaving school is probably 90%. I mean, they come out, they're so overwhelmed by life, and they don't have any work. They don't have any ideas for themselves at that point.
So let's just go to this first image that we have, because I want to show your work, which is so beautiful.
Right.
And would you say this is what you were doing at the time, or this is something
This
late?
is what I grew into. I graduated from Alfred in 1967. This is a piece from the late 70s. It was a piece that I submitted to the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian, who was organizing a show called American Porcelain, and it was accepted and in the show. And it was a show that traveled all over the world. It was very exciting.
Wow.
And it was I was in a group of people, most part were not studio ceramics. Most of them were professors. And, you know, it was a very, very wonderful gang to finally found myself with. And so I continued doing that. At the same time, I was selling this work. I had a serious production studio, and I was...
You were living in the Berkshires at this time?
I was living in the Berkshires. I had moved with my family. We had moved up there in '74. And,
just specifically to set up a studio?
Yeah, we were working, our studio in New York was very small and only an electric kiln. I had been trained with a gas kiln. I wanted a big gas kiln. And so my husband was finishing He had been working for the Whitney Museum doing in their education program, and he was starting to burn out from that. So he said, okay, we can, this is sort of has been our relationship all along. Okay, we can go and see how that works out. So
that's great.
And we raised our children up there, which was really lovely. It was.
And so you were really selling your work all the way?
I was. I was selling. My largest account was Neiman and Marcus, and I got the account, and they sent me the shipping book, which was sort of like the Manhattan telephone directory. And I'm like, oh my Lord, I don't think we're ready for this world yet. But we did it. It was a wonderful woman who was the buyer there, who loved my work and gave me little one-person shows and all these Neiman Marcuses all over the country. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was a wonderful years. I was living very simply in an old farm in the Berkshires and doing what I wanted, basically every artist's dream.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about the second piece that you have here, because I love the story about the color and how you get the color.
Right.
It really is a precursor of what's going to happen to you in your next stage of your career.
Well, this is a piece that was done sort of towards the end of when I was still working on the wheel with porcelain. At this point, I had learned to throw it so thinly that it really is almost glass-like. And it's quite tall. It's about 12 inches tall. And I was doing all of the decoration with slips while the piece was still on the wheel. And so
slips are colors.
Colors. It's instead of there's different materials that you use in ceramics. A glaze goes on after the piece has been dried and bisqued, and then that's the final step. Most decorative work in ceramics is done at the glaze point.
The last part.
The last part. At that point, you kind of forget what the piece was all about. What was wonderful about this was I had just thrown it. It's just still wet, and I'm decorating it, and it was very immediate. And the clay is soft, so I'm actually incising. There's lines. It's very three-dimensional. It has a very tactile surface. And then once the piece was fired the first time, and I'm ready to put a glaze on it, I started putting copper red glazes on the inside, and the pieces are so thin that the copper red glaze is actually coming through the wall of the clay, and that's what these wonderful pink lines are. It's not glaze, it's not a red glaze, it's the vapor of the copper.
Right, so you're getting these colors, these translucence of colors that are coming one on top of another.
Right.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah, so it was a good series.
But then you stopped.
And then I stopped.
And I love your next series. You call it the carpool series.
Well, I was doing this series, and I'm noticing that where the slip was, the clay is not adhering. And one of the problems with porcelain is it's so dense that you can't really make a thick wall because it'll explode in the kiln. Oh. So I thought, well, what if you made a thick piece and you incised it, you cut it apart while it was still wet, and you put the slip on, and then you banged it all back together again. When it starts to fire and there's air in there, it's just going to come out through these lines.
Okay.
And so they started very small. In fact, the first piece I made, I remember I put an unfired pot on top of it in case it exploded.
Oh, okay.
It's because I didn't want it to ruin the whole kiln with its gigantic explosion, which it didn't do. And they became bigger and bigger. And by the end, I was doing work that was, there's pedestal size, but they were weighing about 75 pounds.
So this is like Venezia. Let's talk a little bit about Venezia. That's what we're talking about, right?
Right.
It's like, so it's coming from you carpooling and looking at the rocks.
Carpooling and looking at all of the road cuts in New England. My daughters were going in totally different directions to school, and also coming from where I live. I live on our farm in New England is on a glacial stream, a glacial river valley with the most beautiful rocks in the world.
And the colors, they must be incredible. So that's where you're getting the colors.
Incredible colors, and just this water in the stream and the sense of movement. So the pieces got very intense. Well,
let's look at a couple more. Ferris is another one.
Ferris is another one. This was a piece that was in a show in Japan.
You had to ship it.
Had to ship it.
Wow.
Nippon Express. Using iron, and the pieces were. By the end, and the pictures you're seeing here are pieces from the last two series that I did.
So the next one, the cobalt ledges.
Right. Using now combinations of both colored slips, colored and different colored clays. And
Okay.
I was just starting, they're very geological. People laugh at me and they say, you really wanted to just make stones, and that really is what they feel like. I mean, people...
Are they heavy?
They're very heavy. They're solid.
Oh, they're solid. There's no...
They're absolutely solid. I can barely lift them.
No kidding.
Good, yeah.
So it's almost like marble or something.
Yes,
yeah.
they look like marble. I would make the form, a large raw piece, and then I would let it dry very slowly under plastic for maybe a month or so. And then I would start carving it, because the original piece is just a big block.
So now you've changed from the wheel and the throwing, and now you're into carving.
I'm into carving, still ceramics. I was very concerned with at the end for the detailing of them. So they're very, very finely sanded with emery cloth. And they have this beautiful smooth surface. But there's cracking in them, because that's where the air is coming from. The air is coming out, cracking the pieces. And
it makes it more exciting.
It was exciting.
You've got this fineness with the
and it's interesting. A lot of things in the world of ceramics, there's so many people coming up on your tail and doing what you're, looking at you and seeing what you're doing. No one ever figured out what I was doing.
Really? But then you stopped.
Right. I stopped because in 1989, my husband looked at me literally across the dinner table and said, we still had my tiny little pottery shop in New York, which we had turned into a small retail store.
So, which is still there?
Which is still there.
It's in Brooklyn,
It's in Brooklyn, in Park Slope, called the Clay Pot. Okay.
But no longer shows your work.
No. And we'd been running it basically as an absentee business. He would go down about once a month and kind of deal with it. And he looked at me, he says, at this point we had 2 children in very expensive colleges. He says, I think we need to go down and deal with this business that this was becoming, because I was no longer making production pottery.
Right.
Was really becoming our sole income. And he said, so could you stop for a little while and we'll see what we can do? And I had just fired a big kill. It was a wonderful firing. I said, yeah, I could stop for a little while. We'll see what we can, I'll go down with you. So he rented us an apartment and we went down. And that was 1989, and I never came back. Oh. I mean, we didn't sell our farm, but we now have 2 residences. And I basically, within about 5 years, had closed up the ceramic studio.
So how did you get, I can see the color. I see how color comes into what you do next. But how does it become flat and become paintings?
Well, I had no intention of setting up another ceramic studio in New York. I had done that, and I just did not want to go there again. I'd always want, and as the work, the last part of the sculptures had become so graphic, there was an easy entry into flat dimension. In fact, I was doing a lot of drawing of designs before I would do the pieces, and working out color gradations. And so I was kind of there. I just needed the time really to take. And so it was a gift of time. I'm out of my ceramic studio, and I have some obligations to this family business, but I also have no children that I'm raising at the moment. So I had some extra time, and I started working in my apartment, just at the dining room table, doing,
just doing sketches.
Just doing sketches. I started working using oil pastels.
Okay, is that this first one, this 1990?
No, these are later, and all of these are later. I haven't. Didn't photograph any of that really early work. It took a while for me to figure out where I was going. The first paintings were black and white. Okay. Very much like the ceramics. I was doing very, very subtle gray scales.
Yeah, right.
So from light to dark. From light to dark, a lot of them went light or dark until light. And then I was taking, after I finished painting that, then I would take one of those grays and I would wash over it. So in some places it was white, and some places it was dark. Well, that was sort of fun for about 5 paintings, but it was also becoming, it was a very close, very dead end.
I picture it being so hard for you working in black and white after you've worked with colors, beautiful colors.
But the sculptures were basically black and white. I mean, they were blue, or there wasn't a variety of color. It was very monochromatic, and but immediately I realized I wanted to work in color. And color Color is a very fascinating world, and
You have certainly explored it.
I feel like I just kind of stumbled down the rabbit hole almost, you know, and now I'm following it, and it's leading me. And so what I wanted to do with color, obviously, because where I was coming from, I wanted to do the same thing in color I had been doing in black and white. I wanted to make a gradation that you couldn't see. The difference was, to make a gradation in color, you have to eliminate light value, and which is completely the opposite of a black and white gradation, where you're adding light. Color, you're eliminating that, and it's very hard.
I think just to simplify it, the way I would explain it is, you've got different colors.
Right.
That when you look at them and squint down, they wash each other out, so they become the same value, the same tone.
Exactly.
Sort of thing.
Exactly.
They're different colors, though.
Right.
So that's what differentiates them, instead of saying gray and a lighter gray.
Right. Right.
So I think this first one, this 1995, is a perfect example. Those, if you squint down, even though they're different colors, you can see there's a difference.
And I've started doing them as drawings in the beginning.
So that painting is
It's
actually oil pastel? Or
actually, it's just different crayons and pencils.
Okay.
Yeah, I created a very hard ground using colored pencils, and then started working on them on top of crayons. And they almost became like holograms.
So, but you're still working only with two colors?
Two colors.
The same colors, the same color in a pencil and the same color?
No, these have colors in them. These have different layers.
Do you notice that up front when you're close? Or
when you're up front, you'll see, because you're actually looking into them.
Okay.
It almost became very textural in a way.
So are these small? Or?
Very small, yeah. They were very tiny, just little oil.
And then the next one, 1997, you get more of a feeling of how they blend.
These I had been doing along at the same time. Probably in 1994 started trying to do these paintings, and it took me 3 years to technically begin to do it. Hundreds of colors between the blue and the yellow. Very, very thin brush, totally vertical lines, the color moving from one to the other. The most successful ones were ones where your eye literally only saw the two outside colors. It was like two blocks. Like the drawing, it became just yellow and blue, and your eye filled in all the colors in between. Yellow and blue, no green, just yellow and blue. And
does your eye see green?
Your eye doesn't see the green.
It
doesn't see the green. The green is there, but your eye won't see it.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it was very,
You're really playing with our eyes.
Absolutely, it became very visual. I started reading so much. I mean, I was like reading all of this technical work about color vision and just the history of color and painting. I mean, my husband's looking at my book bill, and wondering what's going on.
So
here.
You're working almost like an Agnes Martin. I can the strokes, lines of color.
One of my studio mates, because at this point I had outgrown the dining room table, and I had rented a studio near my apartment, and one of my women that had a studio next to me came in to see what I was doing and said, "Do you know Agnes Martin?" And I said, "I do know Agnes Martin, because the paintings take some of the essence of that luminosity that Agnes Martin was trying to do with that linear, very, very fine, thin layers of paint. This feels like them. They're very luminous. This painting is large. It's 70 inches by 70 inches.
And I just want to show that you make a lot of color charts.
Right.
So you must experiment with a lot of colors, and then choose one, and then make the painting from it.
Well, I found when I was doing these paintings, I was trying to find colors that had the possibility of becoming the same value, the same light value, because obviously if you take a very, very pale color and try to match it with a purple, dark purple, you're already out of the game.
Right.
So I'm working mostly with complementary colors that I can try to regulate the end colors to be as close as I possibly can. They're never perfect. I mean, there's always variations, and there's variations because of light. Different light creates
Well, I imagine
different
even
painting.
us watching them now on the television is going to be different than seeing them in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to just go through a couple in that same stage, the Stockholm 2000 is the same idea.
The same idea,
Yeah.
but now I'm beginning to, I'm no longer sort of making almost monochromatic paintings, these very simple ones. I'm beginning to get, because of the color studies,
Right.
I'm beginning to see other things that are happening, that were happening in the large paintings, but I didn't understand it. And some of this is a technical term called simultaneous contrast, where a color is reflecting the colors on either side of it. So half of the color will look kind of pink, and the other half of the color is looking a little orange, but it's really all the
one
same color.
Right.
And so to show that, of course, you want to get it into a grid format so that people can see that. So I did a wonderful series of paintings in the late 90s that were all dealing with this grid and just two colors. The colors have gotten quite vibrant now, which was exciting.
And you're working in oils?
We're always been worked in oils.
Okay.
They're always been oils, and
are they they're not glazing. You're putting on, because we discussed this. You're not glazing your colors. You're putting on actual color.
these are actual. There's no layers.
There's no layers.
There's
It's
no
one
layers.
color.
Just one flat
color.
color, and your eye is doing all the work.
That's great. It's fabulous. And then the late spring, this is a fabulous because it's two colors.
It's two colors coming from either side, crossing over each other, and then the grid that you're seeing is other color. Those colors also crossing over.
But it's your eye that's making another color.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And then in 2004, again, the color study fall. Now you're introducing another color.
Then I started to introduce, after the series of paintings in 2004, I was just beginning to sense that this was going to be a lot more fun with more colors. So I started with very simple. I found green to be a very magical color in this world, that it tends to hold its own. There's a philosopher who always said that green was the fourth primary.
Interesting.
So I did a whole series of using green and orange and a blue and having them mix into each other.
And, well, is that triadic? The green and orange and blue in a way?
I mean, they're all triadic in a way.
Yeah. But I think, is it important whether it's a blue green or a yellow green? Does that changes the whole idea?
And there's a lot of beginning mixing that's just kind of trying to find those colors that you want to commit yourself to.
And you're still doing these color studies?
I'm still doing the color studies.
You have thousands of them.
I have literally thousands of them. Stacks of paper. Yes, because the paintings are the end of the process. The process really is involved in the discovery of the structure that the painting eventually becomes, and making the colors to be as perfect as possible in terms of their value.
So all along we've kind of had muted colors, but now we're up to 2006 in the summer, and you're really being bold now.
I'm starting to get very bold, and this is a really magical painting. It's a very, very simple painting because it's really just three colors, and the red and the green are both going into the blue. They don't go into each other. And what's fascinating is how, when you look at the painting closely, of how long the green still wants to be green and how long the red wants to be red before it turns into blue. And it's very interesting. I mean, it's very...
So would you say the color takes over, is what you're saying?
The color absolutely takes over. I'm following the color. The color is leading me.
But you prepare that, would you say that the red and the green are the same size when you're painting it, or... same amount of space, but when you're seeing it, it's not that way. It changes.
Well, it changes.
Right, that's interesting. So interesting. And then, by March 2007, now you're starting to get into pattern.
Yes. Now, as there's more colors to play with, and I'm beginning to sense the repetition of them is an interesting place to go.
Explain that a little bit. Would you when you say the repetition? Because the others have a repetition also.
Right, but this is more. The repetition is more da 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 da. Whereas the other one was other paintings. There was a longer spaces, and so it's becoming more. You see the pattern right away. You know of how the colors are laid down and the sequencing of the colors. And
I know when I've been looking at them, they vibrate.
Yes.
They're really doing a,
Yeah.
and not just with complementary colors. Almost
no,
you're
they
really,
shimmer. The paintings shimmer. They have a presence to them it's interesting.
yeah, it really
Yeah,
is. And the summer 2007, that became a real pattern.
That's a real pattern, and that one really vibrates. That one has
you
a
could
big
tell. Well, that's
vibration.
complementary colors.
And then you get into complementary colors.
Right, which is the theory
Yeah.
of the Impressionists. With
Exactly.
the whole, but also Bridget Riley. I want to think about op art and Bridget Riley.
No,
And
I definitely crossed over into that world for a while. It wasn't a world that I ever wanted to get into, so I felt that a little bit of it went a long way.
Well, but I think, like you say,
Yeah.
sometimes we have no control. We
Exactly,
have to, go with
exactly.
where our idea is taking
no,
us. And,
no, I mean the
and-
dissolving boundaries between the colors become optical, and so when you start repeating them, then they become playful in
Right.
terms of that. Yeah.
And by November 2008 now, I like the story that you told me that you start in the left-hand corner, is it?
I do. I start in there. It's almost like planting a field. I start at the left-hand corner, and I mostly work vertically. A lot of times I'll turn the painting on its side when it's finished, but the strokes are usually always vertical strokes because I'm just working with gravity. I don't graph it out in terms of rulers, but I will measure it out so that I have some control of the proportions of the painting, and I just start going.
And so when the pattern is in your mind, though, ahead of time, you've worked out how this pattern is going to go?
I've worked out the sequence of how the colors are going to move into each other, and then I work out the repeat. It's almost like weaving, and then but it's loose, so it's not, I don't use a rule. People say, are you taping? No tape. Do you use a ruler to paint it? No, we're just all doing it by eye. And the paintings tend to, for some reason, they start wide at the top and then they start curving down. So
The way you're working.
yeah, the way I'm working, they could get compressed at the bottom, and then I'll sort of go up, and then I will draw a straight line if it gets to, and then I'll draw it back out to that line,
right.
and then it happens again, and then I'll draw it
So
again.
these are not mechanical or anything
They're
like
not
that.
mechanical.
They're really
Yeah.
individual, original, each one of these.
Absolutely.
They cannot be
Yeah.
reproduced or
No,
can't.
They're not computer driven.
They're not computer driven. Very important.
Right.
All right, I want to finish up with the last two, summer 2009.
Right. 2 summers ago now, I had 4 small canvases, and I was working in my studio. A lot of this is divided between where I was working. So I'm up in my studio in Massachusetts, which is no longer a pot shop, it's a painting studio.
Okay.
And I have 4 small 3 by 3 foot canvases, and I've decided to use the same colors on all 4 and just start seeing where that would go rather than changing the colors. And what I was working for, and I began to get there, is I was trying to break up the regularity of the pattern. I was trying to make the pattern more amorphous, so less visible to the eye, a little more mysterious. I wanted to make the very, very light in-between colors that are barely red or barely green become their own, give them their own space, so that your eye will see this pattern of colors, and some of them will look very pale, but they look the same color. They just look paler. They don't look muddy. They don't look like brown. They look red, they look green, but they're paler. And they're smaller because they're taking up less space because they don't have as many friends around them. And so that's where I started, and I'm still working with this. This is where I'm going now. It's
And so this last one,
This
May
last
2010, which is one of the most recent ones.
Exactly.
That's not the same color as summer 2009.
No, the
okay.
colors have changed.
Okay,
This
but-
was just one series that I did.
But you're doing a series of, let's say, May 2010 of those same colors, but it'll look
Right.
totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can't wait to see where you go next. I mean,
Thank
it's so
you.
exciting. I can't.
It is
it's just-
exciting.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been very exciting. I feel very lucky. that I've had the space of my life to start something, stop it, and start something else, and keep doing it. You know, I mean, my college roommate once looked at me and she said, "I can't believe you're still doing this."
Isn't that wonderful to have a passion?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you, and for inviting me. This was very exciting for me.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm glad you came. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.